Hey everybody, this is Pete Bartolozzi welcoming you to another class session. And we're continuing with understanding ages and dispensations. And last session, we pretty well came to the end of the sixth dispensation, the church, we call it the church age. The Bible doesn't call it the church age, but the age of grace, the dispensation of grace, the dispensation of the mystery, as Paul also called it. And we kind of came to the conclusion of that. Now we come to this point of the tribulation period. Like I said, some believe this is a part of the last 7 years of the church age, technically, and that may very well be. And then there's others who believe, well, once it's 7 years of Jewish times that had not yet been fulfilled, Old Testament times we may call it, that will go back because Israel is the focus of that time, not the church. And with that focus, some people believe it's that, an intermediate time between the end of the dispensation of grace to the point of the seventh dispensation, which is the dispensation of divine government, or as we more commonly call it, the millennial reign of Christ. And the glorious church of this time will rule and reign with him. So whether it's just a part of the end of the church age as it ushers in the Lord's return, or if it's going fulfilling 7 years of that time, I don't think it's really a cause for debate. Even though you may stand on one side or the other, and there's nothing wrong with presenting your views on that. But I'm not going to go into great detail and try to get into that aspect of it. We just know it's going to happen. So that's one thing we do agree on. It's very clear in the Word of God that this 7-year tribulation is going to happen. Now, again, I taught Daniel Revelation, and so, but at this point, I just want to give key points for us to understand what's going to be taking place, or I should say, key points to help us understand this time of what initiates the beginning of the tribulation, what's going to take place, and so on. So I'm giving key points in order to give guidelines to help anybody who wants to study out end time biblical prophecy for themselves. Key points to which all too many end time teachers miss. End time events, and because of this, greatly misinterpret the Word of God concerning end time prophecy. So there's some key points to help keep us not getting off on one side or the other. And I know that the book of Revelation is a book that there's probably 1,000,001 interpretations out there. And so I know when even I teach Daniel Revelation, I know I'm putting another one in the mix of all that's out there. And I knew one minister who said, he says, I believe the book of Revelation different than most out there. And he said, but I don't teach it. I don't put it out because I'll just be putting it out in the mass confusion of the plethora of teachings and interpretations that are out there now. And but what I want to take a look at, the first key point is the whole book of Revelation has to do with his return. His return, well, the book in its entirety is the revelation of Jesus Christ. That is, this book is all about the revealing of Jesus to this world. His return is not just one event that occurs at the end of the tribulation that usually referred to as the second advent of the Lord, when he splits the eastern sky, riding with a white horse and his saints riding with him, defeats the Antichrist and his armies at Armageddon, etc., etc., etc. This book reveals that the second coming of the Lord comes in stages, not a single event. Now, beginning with the pre-tribulation rapture of the glorious church and culminating with what we normally call the second coming or second advent of the Lord, as described above, as I just described. The whole 7-year period is a part of the revealing of Jesus Christ to this world. Even the letters to the churches are a part of this, as their purpose is to cause the church to become glorious, because it's the glorious church who will usher in the Lord's return. That's why those letters are all important to the revealing of Jesus Christ to this world. The church needs to become glorious, because the glorious church, and I believe in this end time move of the Spirit and the Word that some call a great awakening. I've been calling the glorious church revival, because the culmination of the glorious church will come together during this time. And so the whole 7-year period is the revealing of Jesus to this world. Again, the letters to the churches are a part of this, and this is a cause why, because the church becoming glorious will usher in the Lord's return. This is a key point we need to acknowledge. It's not just, the Lord's return is not just what happens at the end of the tribulation when he comes, splits the eastern sky and so on. This whole thing is the revealing of Jesus Christ to this world. Again, beginning with the pre-tribulation rapture of the glorious church, culminating when he splits the eastern sky at the end of the tribulation and so on. The next key point I think that's really important is understanding what many today refer to as the prophetic earth. A minister that I've had great respect for, who's gone home to be with the Lord, Kenneth E. Hagin, he said little to nothing about end-time biblical prophecy. However, when I attended his school, he very briefly got on this subject by stating that he believed revelation different than anyone else out there. And of all those out there, at the time, he agreed the most with Hilton Sutton. He mostly stated that America, or I should say, he boldly stated that America would not be a part of the Antichrist regime. Now, when he said that, I didn't know anything about, end time prophecy and the book of Revelation. In fact, in those younger days, I stayed away from the book of Revelation because there was so much different things that people were teaching. It was confusing, and I just said, forget it. And in fact, I even read the book of Revelation myself, and I basically told people I understand, about 10%. I speculate on about 10%, and the rest of it I have no idea. That's kind of the attitude I had as a young man. And but when he said this, even though I didn't have hardly any revelation about understanding the book of Revelation, when he said that, something on the inside said, he's right, listen to that. And I hung on that for many years, but it was many years later before I really got into study the subject and began to realize he was right. So the Antichrist, and he said this, the Antichrist would never govern the whole globe of the earth as many preach. At the time, again, I didn't have knowledge of this. But something on the inside said, he's right. I had that inward witness, that inward something that just welled up in me, the Spirit of God. He stated, and after he made that statement, which sounds so contrary to what most people think, he stated that we need to look at how the Bible uses the phrase whole world and whole earth. And then he quoted Luke chapter 1, where it says that Caesar Augustus sent out a decree that all the world should be taxed. But did Caesar tax any of the world outside of his control? What about Central and Southern Africa? What about China, Russia? What about the Indians here in America? Did he tax them? Then he stopped there, didn't go any further. He told us to depend upon the Spirit of God to teach us concerning these things. If we depend upon him, he said, he will. He will teach you. Even though now I have found, after studying it, evidence after evidence after evidence of this biblical truth. And of course, I went over that evidence through the books of Daniel and Revelation. But here, I'm just going to give you a taste of that evidence. First, in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 2, it says, "And Daniel spoke up and said, I saw in my vision at night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." One of the most important things about end time prophecy is made right here. This is not a superfluous opening statement just to start off the conversation. This is a very key and pivotal verse, a foundational verse, if you would, in understanding biblical prophecy. And yet all too many end-time preachers miss this and thoroughly misinterpret biblical prophecy. This verse lays the background of all end-time biblical prophecy. The Great Sea is the backdrop for all end-time biblical prophecy. So what is the Great Sea? This answer is found within Scripture. In the first part of Numbers chapter 34, the boundaries for the land of Israel are being laid out by God. And verse 6 of Numbers 34 clearly declares, "And as far as the western border, you shall have the Great Sea for a border. This shall be your western border." This is repeated in Joshua 9:1 and Joshua 15:12. So, simple question. What is the western border of Israel? The Mediterranean Sea. The Great Sea is simply an ancient name for what we today call the Mediterranean Sea. This is the background for all end-time biblical prophecy. That is, the European, Middle Eastern, North African, Mediterranean area of the earth, not the whole globe of the earth, as we Westerners would view the phrase, all the world that Caesar made. You see, when we think all the world, whole earth, we think of it in an entirely different view than what they did. And God spoke to them with the way they understood. He didn't speak to them according to, English-speaking American people that did not even exist in their day. He didn't talk to them according to that way, our way of thinking. So in many ways, Christians have grossly misinterpreted the Bible in America because we try to interpret it upon our American way of thinking and not understanding how they think. And we'll look at that a little closer. But anyway, let me go on. The second thing we need to take note to, it helps in setting some guidelines for looking at the book, looking at end time events, is Revelation chapter 6, the first 8 verses. And it says, "And I watched when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures as a voice of thunder saying, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and the one sitting on it had a bow. And a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering, that is to say, that he may conquer. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, 'Come and see.' And there went out another horse that was red, and it was given to him that sat upon it to take peace from the earth, that they, men, should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come and see.' And behold, I looked, and behold, a black horse. And the one sitting on it had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures say, 'A koinix of wheat for a denarius, and 3 koinixes of barley for a denarius. And you are not to harm the oil and the wine.' And when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the 4th living creature say, 'Come and see.' And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of the one sitting on it is Death, and hell followed with him. And the authority was given to all of them, was given to them over the 4th of the earth, and to kill with the sword, with famine, and with death. and by wild animals of the earth. It says that authority was given to them, not just the fourth rider, but to all of them. That is, all four riders were given authority in the fourth of the earth. Herein lies the area of the earth that these four riders have effect in, not the whole globe of the earth, but only 1/4 of the earth. So the final phrase of verse 8, when it says authority was given to them, implying to all of them, this is a concluding statement of these first four riders. The Greek actually says, because the King James says a fourth of the earth, but if you notice I read it the fourth, because the Greek actually has the definite article there, and it says the fourth of the earth, not just a fourth of the earth, referring to a specific fourth of the earth. Again, not just any fourth. Since this book has to do with end-time biblical prophecy, then the fourth of the earth has to refer to the same area of Daniel's prophecy, the European, Middle Eastern, North African, Mediterranean area of the world. Now, this is not every verse that reveals this truth, but I leave you with what Brother Hagin said, it left me with back then. When you study this subject, ask the Holy Spirit to teach you, and He will. So that gives you some foundational thought to begin with there. The next key point that I want to bring out in understanding the tribulation period, what we call end-time biblical prophecy, is I want to bring out this understanding of how we think, and as I was already beginning to talk about. We Westerners are trained to think in what is called lineal thinking, analytical, sequential, chronological, where Eastern thinking from ancient times has been what is described as holistic thinking, thinking more abstractly, simultaneously seeing the many different parts and how they work together as they make up the whole of the story or of the information. The book of Revelation was written with holistic thinking. Every time Westerners try to interpret Revelation with our lineal thinking, they have brought forth gross error, because holistic thinking can't be interpreted as a whole with lineal thinking. This is one reason why there are so many different interpretations that are out there, not only in error, but doing nothing more than causing confusion concerning end-time biblical prophecy. The book of Revelation, and I emphasize this, was not written chronologically. Those who try to cause false interpretation every single time. When God gave Brother Hagin a vision, his first vision, back in 1950, he stated that there were 4 parts to the vision. Each time he stated when the vision changed. There are many parts to John's vision, and he doesn't say the vision changed to another scene, like maybe we would say. But by examining the very wording he gives, we can recognize when the scenes in his vision changes. And since he was revealed so much more, the scenes change quite a bit. Sometimes they change 2 or 3 times in one chapter by the wording that he gives. Sometimes the chapter breaks are placed where the scene changes. Sometimes a scene is for more than one chapter. And again, as I mentioned, sometimes the scene changes 2 or 3 times within a chapter. And sometimes it even switches back and forth between scenes. But each scene, they're not all lineal in like a straight line. Everything's just laid out. This is how it happens. But it's building upon each other with each scene filling in more detail concerning the whole. So instead of lineal this way, it's like it builds from the bottom up, and it shows all this. It gives you this information about the 7 years, and then it comes back and layers more information, and then comes back and layers more information, most of what is taking place simultaneously. Now, not every scene changes goes back to the beginning. A lot of the scene changes go back to the mid-trib. And all of a sudden at mid-trib, they're giving you more information. And then sometimes later on, it's giving you more information towards the latter end of the tribulation. It works kind of like that. I usually have an outline. I forgot to write it up on the board. Maybe I can get it up there for next time and just kind of explain it a little bit. But it begins and works its way up. For instance, the first 6 seals cover the entire 7-year tribulation, because by the time you get to the 6th seal, we're at the end of the tribulation, because it reveals events correlating with the finality of the Lord's return. Let me give you an example of that. In Joel chapter 2, verse 31, speaking of the end, it says, "And the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and the terrible day of the Lord come." Then Revelation chapter 6, verse 12 through 17 says, "And I saw when he had opened the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became blood, and the stars fell from heaven to the earth, even as a fig tree casts forth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heavens departed as a scroll, and it rolled back, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, and great men, and rich men, and chief captains, and mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in dens and rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who is able to stand?" Before the great and terrible day of the Lord, in Joel, his comment corresponds with the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come in Revelation. And notice that this day, it describes the finality of his return. Both Joel and Revelation here are speaking of the sun becoming black and the moon becoming blood, clearly speaking of the same event, because it was the great and terrible day of the Lord, and here we have Jesus returning at the end when we see the 6th seal opened. So, and notice, and this is all at that time. And Jesus also confirms this when he taught this in Matthew 24, where he said in verses 29 and 30, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." Again, a third witness of these events occurring at the finality of his return, at the end of the tribulation, the second coming of the Lord. And this is revealed in the 6th seal. So the first 6 seals cover the entire span of the 7-year tribulation. This reveals to us that after the 6th seal, things cannot be chronologically, because we're already at the end of the tribulation by the 6th seal. But the 7th seal reveals the first level of God's judgments, which begin at mid-trib. So you got the whole period covered in the first 6 seals, and then the 7th seal comes back to the mid-trib and starts revealing another layer of information. This is how holistic thinking works. You see, in holistic thinking, there are many scene changes of revealing layers of events that are taking place, often simultaneously with other events that have already been mentioned. As all these things are building, it's showing what's going on as a whole. While some of the scenes simply refer to certain information. Now, each scene is chronological. But as the scene changes, it's no longer chronological. So this is all holistic thinking. And we'll look at this next time, as I forgot to put it all up on my board. Revelation, I want to look at the next point now that we need to take a look at. Revelation chapter 1, verse 19, it says, John, in this verse, and I don't have it written down here, so I'm going to quickly turn to Revelation chapter 1 and in verse 19, where it states, Jesus is speaking, and he's telling John, write the things which you have seen, past tense, the things which are, present tense, and the things which shall be hereafter, future tense. John here is told to write concerning past, present, and future, even though we know a vast majority of it is future. So even though that's true about the vast majority being future, not all the things in the book of Revelation are future. Not even after chapter 4. Sometimes God shows the past, ties it in with the present, and then how the past and present ties in with the future, kind of showing it go right along from past, present, and then to future, how it all connected. Chapter 12 is a prime example of this, which begins with the historic past of Israel, then brings us to the present as it flows into revealing the future of Israel. Again, I'm not going to get into that in detail. I got the teaching out there. I'm going to make teaching concerning Daniel Revelation as one of the Bible school courses that I teach. Believing that everything is past, even after chapter 4 of Revelation, and it's after chapter 4 of Revelation saying it's all future, causes Christians to grossly misinterpret several things, especially Revelation chapter 12. And then the next thing I want to get into is going to take a little time, so I'm not going to get into that. I want to talk about the raptures that the Bible, and I want you to notice I did say plural, raptures that the Bible reveals to us. But I'm going to leave you hanging until next class session. And so I'm just going to thank you for sitting in on this class session. I trust it's been a blessing to you. And so until next time, be blessed.